Um, this is one more video in the series. If any of these statements sound true to someone, these thoughts I've had. The thoughts are loosely inspiring one the other, and they've been occurring to me over at least the last day. But they somewhat a little bit occur differently as I'm making a video. And sometimes as the video is failing to upload differently than as I had conceived them in the first place, but they are still, I think, connected, interconnected, and then also they are, I think they're coherent and into a similar a line of reasoning and thought and value. At least like they're the terms of prioritizing is there. There's the value that I'm saying the they're reflecting the same values and a function of the same values. But what I meant to say is so in this video I had talked about a couple of different things, and even yesterday I made a couple statements that have a bearing on some of the statements I've made in this. So one thing I wanted to say is that I made another discussion about that I had a family member that had worked in Africa, was trained in the United States or in Africa, then more so the United States and then Africa, and he worked around some very significant appearance of a sexually transmitted disease in Africa. But I wanted to say in that video when I cited my father as saying that is that one time he said sometimes my father makes comments like when I'm talking to him that I actually don't I don't know that they're they're not I don't enjoy I like talking a lot about a lot of stuff, and especially with my father, but some things are just better there some things are better understood than said. So I think that like some things about like sexual transmitted disease and even just sex in general is better understood than said unless it's at a place and time where it's at the place and time to be said. So but so I don't know that there's a need to talk about certain things that are known to people, and we all make choices and we all enjoy things. But my father once said that that his people and it's a heavy comment to put on anyone, even your son, in a conversation or even a video on YouTube. But just in the interest of conveying the idea, he said that some of his people that where he comes from, where this sexually transmitted disease was, it was a new onset within his lifetime, and he had already been well into adulthood before it became onset, and then it had been present with us since that onset when he was a young man, but it had not been known to the people where my father's from, and my father is connected deeply to the roots of that region where he himself grew up around, and then his mother was something of an orator. And if you're familiar with African culture in general, you sometimes you may meet people who have such a command of history and facts that is beyond encyclopedic, and it would really boggle the mind how a human being could be that comprehensive but also accurate about histories and ideas. And one person like that would be the eminent Taj Trig Bey that I've cited on this channel. Another similar person would be Jason Black, an influential YouTuber. You listen to any of those two men and the type of insights, but also the history. Maybe Judge Joe Brown might be similar. The history and the facts and the treaties and the battles and the laws and the false notions and the false history and the real history that they can cite, and then the words, the biblical history, what is fact, what is allegory, with running in and through the history of holy texts, going to the deeper politics that are both popular and more so obscure, the points of history that are popular and obscure, and how those overlap and redouble and inform each one the other. You listen to people like that, and it really does make you wonder, one, if they've ever consumed a substance of any kind to be capable of that, and then two, it really goes a little bit beyond even words like genius. I think genius has a different it actually has a different meaning, but also conveys a different feeling than around these people. There's a book about the Beatles that says that the word genius can be appreciated simply as having a unique facility around patterns, is what is referred to with the word genius. So genius would be one that can both recognize, engage, comprehend, and as equally dispense, improvise, approve upon, and dispense with patterns is what is referred to as genius. But with these people, you have patterns, but you also have fact in detail that is really profound. But my father tells me that in Africa, you had orators, like people who would have the oral history of a people. So my father said at certain funerals in Africa, you might meet a man there who is actually asking questions about people, and he's getting the real facts, but he's also sharing the facts of a people and the relationships and like, so before you had contracts and like inheritances and stuff like that, in times past you didn't have the access to paper like that. So for the conveying of business and legal matters, but also history and learning and skill, you actually needed to remember that in times past. So it would make sense that, and then also the author Sebastian Younger, he's made very interesting books about themes like war, and he's also embedded with troops in war zones, in outposts in war zones, and he's been with embattled troops, and he's gone through battles with troops as a journalist. And he had a partner that was with him in some of his documentaries. He had a documentary called Restrepo, and then one of his partner in there was he was behind the camera that whole film, so you didn't see him there, but they were together in that. And his partner went to, I think, Libya after that, and he was doing similar daring journalism, and he lost his life instantly. That's the thing that's so deadly about war and violence in general, is that you can be through so much stuff together, or through so many things, so many battles, so many experiences, and it takes the simplest, randomest thing that can take you out of here permanently. So that's one thing not to trifle with or mince with, things like violence and war, unless you have a reason that you feel compelled by, or that you would be obligated by. But it's nothing light violence, and it's beyond serious, and and we're beyond delicate, because we can be up out of here instantly. But he says in there that actually diversity within people, but also within families, is very significant. So that you would have people with different politics in a family, different stances, is actually a natural part of a human community, and it gives viability and versatility and strength to a community to have different standpoints, which are maybe a function of orientation and leanings and values and experience. So you can have people in the same family with very different politics and stances, as I do, as a lot of us have. And he says that that's completely natural, and that's not bad, and that's actually by nature, to his estimation. And that's why I was leaning with the other video that I made about groups, is saying that to have different groups, diversity among groups, but that would also amount to rivalry, would be a part of nature, and the diversity of nature that makes nature dynamic, vital, crucial, and viable. But so with that sense, there'd be people with different gifts and abilities that would be needed by a community. Your artists, your healers, your warriors, your clergy, your teachers, your athletes, all that is necessary, and it's a natural function of the diversity of offspring and humans. And one unique one would be the appearance of a oral historian, or a custodian of history. And you actually have some of those in African culture, as my father tells me, but you can see in an African American culture, which is still has some of the same gifts as African culture, and some of the same heritage. And you can appreciate that in scholars like Taj Tariq Bey and Jason Black and Judge Joe Brown. But all I meant to say is that I was going somewhere with that, is that um, my grandmother was like that. And my grandmother, so my father has close ties to the roots of his people. Um, uh, but also my grandmother was like that, and she had a vast grasp of history, of her own history, her family's history, but also her town and the places she lived. She could remember outstanding details, and she had no idea what a certain sexual transmitted disease was when it appeared in that area. But according to my father, when it had become known, what the elders and the people in that area said is that it's a chaser, is that it chases a person to death and it doesn't stop. But we could actually just say that's life, because life chases us to death and it doesn't stop since we're born.